Hey guys, welcome back to the pod. So I've been thinking about identities a lot recently, what my identities are, and I've also been thinking a lot about what's my main quest versus what's my side quest. Like having all these thoughts in my head about who am I? What am I doing and what are the main things that I'm doing versus the side things that I'm doing? And I think I've objectively liked who I am these last couple of months, this last year, more than any other time in my life. And I think it's because I started to identify myself with, I started to identify myself at the core with things that in the past I would have only thought could be side quests. And concretely, for however many years, 2 decades, I've defined myself as what I thought was my main quest of first being a student and then being a full-time engineer, right? And then everything else in my life was in the periphery. I mean, we have this rhetoric, this narrative of work-life balance, right? And it postulates work being central to life. And what I've thought about more recently is I picture it as a pie chart. Again, we had the happiness pie chart a couple episodes back called Make Your Own Happiness. This pie chart is about the different sectors that comprise the identity of who I am. And whereas before it seemed as though work or school, so being an engineer or a student, that's my core identity. Really, I'm just Anya, and I've got these other things, these other sectors of my pie chart that really comprise who I am. But our society, I've noticed, postulates those as being our central identity. When you're in a new place, when somebody asks you at a dinner party, what do you do? They're asking what your job is, right? Oftentimes what financially supports you, which is interesting that we're so central to, why do we want to know how somebody gets their money? I don't know. It's interesting. So when somebody says, what do you do? We oftentimes go straight to work. When we meet people, there's a couple different levels of the depth of how we want to know people. And the very outer last level is understanding the basics. So that's their name, where they are, their age, their gender. And then our mind has to map in their head. There's 3 different levels. I can refer to it in the show notes. But I also think to that also is, and maybe this is even the second level, but it's also what your job is, how you make money. But, what I do, yes, I'm an engineer from 7 to 3, Monday through Friday. However, there's so much more to me that I'm identifying with way more than what my job is, where in the past I would have thought that the thing that made me money, that's my identity, right? And maybe there's this perfect world. Well, I'm going to create my perfect world. That's going to happen. That is happening. That's what I do every single day. But okay, just hang on with this thought experiment with me. And I think in a perfect world, or in an ideal world, what gives you your resources, your financial resources, is also your identity. I mean, maybe, but I don't think it has to be, right? We can decouple those two things. So I think about with all my ultra training and my EMT stuff. Well, really my ultra is the big one right now. I'm in the building phase of training for my 50-mile ultra. And this fundraiser that I'm doing, all of that takes up so much brain space, way more than my engineering job. I lock into my engineering job during those hours that I'm allocated to. And whereas before I would structure my life around work. right now I feel I'm so grateful, and I recognize that I am in a position where I can structure my work around my other identities. Now, what do I mean here? Because I work remote and I can work hours that are flexible, I can work on the weekends. I can work very early on Eastern time and flex my schedule around my training, my lifting, my EMT studies. And because I work from home, I can wake up at whatever time and then immediately come down, sit at my desk, and do my engineering work. And I don't have that transitory time between needing to drive to an office. So I cannot overstate how grateful I am logistically for this job. And then add on the fact that it is working towards my global goal of going to space. So, and I'll get into how I map this all out in my head. That's the key. That's one of the keys, is going to space is the global goal. So that's what I do everything for, right? That goal is pretty dang vague, right? Go to space. I want to go to space. I want to perform meaningful scientific work, research studies, medical studies. That's still pretty vague. And so why I need these side quests is to break down that global goal into what things do I actually do every single day on the micro scale. And so going back to my job, I'm so grateful that, one, logistically, it allows me to curate my other identities while also still bringing me closer towards that global goal, because I am doing technical engineering analyses every single day, writing reports, making recommendations, working on hardware that is going to space, which is insane, which is so cool. So I'm so grateful for it. And it is, so getting into this, so when I think about, however, what takes up most of my brain space on the day-to-day when I'm not on the clock per se, and it is my ultra training. It is my ultra training and then the side quests associated with that. Because I wake up and I think, where am I running? How long am I running? Or is it a lifting day? What am I doing for my lifts? I'm in the process of finding a new gym. And then that branches off into my fundraiser. So how do I get the word out about my fundraiser? Mapping that out, constantly coming with ideas. My brain is just constantly thinking of what content can I create? Who can I reach out to? Whose stories can I tell? I love thinking about it. It comes naturally to me. I haven't even been able to sleep the last couple nights because I want to stay up until literally like 1, 2 a.m. editing videos. And then I wake up at 5 a.m. and I'm like, I want to edit this. I want to film that. Like go in my head. Right. And that's when I started to realize is I don't think this obsessively about my job, which most of the world, or I think how I've always seen myself, that is, quote, your main quest. But that's not really my main quest right now. Take a shot every time I say quest in this episode. I think more about that physical pursuit. Okay, pursuit, this podcast. I'm also constantly thinking about ideas of what to talk about and what I'm thinking about in life this week. And I love it, and it comes naturally to me. And maybe the perfect world is one where what I'm thinking about constantly is also what gives me the financial freedom, because one of the also major benefits of what I'm calling my side quest as my full-time job is that it gives me not only the time resources in terms of logistical flexibility, but also the financial resources to buy equipment, purchase a gym membership, go on trips, pay registration fees. I mean, all of those cost hundreds of dollars. And so I'm very keen and aware of how special my full-time job is, and how it not only gives me time and financial freedom, and the fact that it's working towards my global goal. I mean, that is just all a win-win. And on that topic, I mean, job versus global quest, I mean, the lines can kind of get blurry here, because, I mean, becoming an astronaut is my career goal. So in a way that is job. But I don't know, at the same time, I feel as though you can almost decouple that, because somebody goes into space, they do their work, they come back down, and they have a full-time engineering or research or medical or what have you job. And, you know, going to space is for a certain period of time. They could be there a couple years, a couple months. They're there for a couple months and then they come back down, at least for the ISS, right? So even when I have that job of, you know, let's say it's an engineer, or I mean, my dream job is going to be something in the medical side and doing medical research. Let's say I'm working my dream job as a medical researcher at NASA Johnson Space Center. Okay, I'm suiting people up, I'm putting them on the treadmill, I'm measuring their heart rate and their metabolism, and I'm measuring their VO2 max, and I'm putting them in different suit combinations and seeing which one they prefer best. And I'm also curating their exercise routines and monitoring their nutrition and seeing how to optimize it. Okay, let's say I'm doing that. that sounds amazing. So let's say I'm doing that. That's my job. And then going to space to do work that supports that kind of research is I mean, that's still the quest. I mean, and so the job that I do on a day-to-day, that's still the side quest, because the main quest is to go to space. So still, the job is supporting that global quest. So in a way, my end goal is completely decoupled from this job title that I have now and that I will have, right? And so I think why I can say I like my identity now more than any other time in my life is because it feels as though I have these distinct identities that I express in different quantities. However, the key for me is that they're all working towards the same global goal. And then it's just the proportion of each one that's really what delineates, okay, is it a main quest or is it a side quest? So my main quest right now is the 50 miles. I need to be able to do the 50 miles, right? And then the side quest with that is the fundraiser, and then raise $1,000 and then create the content. And then another side quest is learning how to do 10 pull-ups. And so learning how to do 10 pull-ups is a lot less meaningful of a side quest than my full-time engineering job, right? But in my head, I put them in the same branch. So the way I see this in my head, I see go to space. And the reason I delineate go to space versus be an astronaut is you can go to space without being an astronaut. An astronaut is when, well, this makes me think about things, because that's your job is to work in space, versus an astronaut. No, that's that. And then go to space, you could just go to space. I mean, what really I want to be an astronaut because I want to do work in space. I don't just want to go out for a joyride. I mean, if anyone's trying to send me up for a joyride, I'm the first ticket. I'm the first one buying. However, what's going to be more meaningful to me is when I can actually go up there and do meaningful work, right? So that's what I see at the very top. And then I see the main quest. And then I see side quests branching off of that. And sometimes the main quests have sides branching off of those. And so it's just these bubbles that expand or contract depending on how much brain space I'm allocating to them. And it crosses some threshold, like it's a greater than or equals than. And then, you know, when it crosses that threshold, that's when it gets into that's when like the quantity of brain space, when it crosses that's when it becomes the main quest versus the side quest. It's how much time am I allocating in my waking energy to thinking about this. And so my pull-up side quest is a lot smaller than my engineering job side quest, but still, what am I thinking about for so many hours of the day? It's my ultra and my fundraiser, and my EMT studies and all of that. And so so EMT is another branch. That's separate enough. That's its own branch. And what I have found is I do in a perfect lifestyle, I am doing even one tiny little thing for each of those quests every single day, because my goal is consistency. My goal is to just stay in the arena. And that reminds me of an episode I did a couple weeks ago, right before graduation, about how do you know what you're doing is right. Well, you just take a step in any direction. Actually, to quote my coach Chris, you take a step in any direction, and those are the little things that you do for each of your quests. And so when I think about what takes up most of my brain space, it's not the engineering analyses I do on a day-to-day basis that I get paid for that give me the resources. I think about those during allocated times of the week. However, really, my brain is coming up ideas with this podcast about creating content for 50 for Fuel. It's about training. It's about running. It's about lifting. Like that has been what is on my mind. Like if I'm just sitting there silent, that's what I'm thinking about right now. And going back, I think the utility of quests is because your identity is what quests you take on. I take on the quest of running 50 miles, I'm a runner. I take on the quest of raising $1,000, what do you call somebody that raises money? I don't know, I'm that person. I strength train, so I'm a lifter. I plan trips, so I'm a traveler. It's the quests that you do create your identity. And as Margarita Nazarenko says, we create ourselves, we don't find ourselves. You create that by taking little actions every day. Your identities fall out of what my identities have fallen out of what I've chosen my quests to be. And so there's it's an imaginary line, okay, of how many times you need to run until you're a runner, for example. I don't know. But at some points I cross that threshold, right? And I consider myself a runner. I mean, it's going to be different for everything. And that's the interesting thing here is you can have a credential on paper, but not identify as that. So I have a credential on paper that I'm an EMT, right? I passed the national exam. I did my clinicals. I took the course. However, I cannot say that my identity is an EMT because I don't have the reps behind that. I have the reps of being in the gym. I have the reps of being a student. That's a big identity of mine, is being a student, is being a learner. Well, see, going back to the beginning, I identified as a student. I'd say really it's identify as somebody who learns. And so what I'm passionate to learn about right now is emergency medicine. And so I am building up that side quest and by proxy that identity of being an EMT by getting involved in that realm. That's all I'll say on that for now. I'll talk more to it when it all comes to fruition, right? But I cannot say to myself that I truly identify as an EMT. I identify as an individual who enjoys studying emergency medicine. So being a practicing EMT is something completely different. In a way here that also ties into something I've been thinking about a lot is habits and why we become the people who we are. And James Clear talks about this, author of Atomic Habits. Habits stick when they are identity-based habits. This comes back down to if somebody runs marathons versus is a runner, they will run a marathon and then Monday morning they're not going to go out for a run because they're not a runner. They ran a marathon. Great. Good job. However, I don't think that you are a runner if you don't continue. I can say you are not a runner if you don't continue to actively run or engage with the running community in some way. If your goal is just to do this one thing and then cross it off and then you're something else, it's fine. I mean, I probably, if I thought hard enough, I have those things. But identity-based habits, what you stick to is when it becomes so core and central to yourself. And this came up as a result with my conversation with Chris, who is an Ironman athlete. And I say that because she has run several. If she had done one and then stopped, if she was interested in doing that one and then stopped, okay, I wanted to dive in of why did you want to keep doing them? And the gist was that at her core, she identifies as two things, an athlete and a builder. And I've always been curious of how she was able to stay so physically fit till now, till her 40s. And it's because she told me, and I think I asked this in the interview in a roundabout way, but it came down to the fact that she has always identified as an athlete. So even when she's no longer playing on a team per se, because that is so fundamental to her identity, she is going to find ways to incorporate movement into her everyday life. And I think it really comes in, and that's one example. And then the other thing I think about is, and this kind of contradicts what I'm saying about the marathon, which is interesting. I need to dive into this thought experiment. I identify as a tennis player, right? But I am not out there playing tennis every day or even every week. But I still identify to my core as a tennis player and part of the global tennis community. Because as a child, that was my identity, was a tennis player. It is one of the most amazing things that my mom ever instilled in me, and I'm so grateful that she did, was instill this sense of being a tennis player, because now, even when I don't play, I still feel so connected to the sport and I still want to engage with it, and I'm still so excited to engage with it, and it's always going to be core to who I am because that's who I was as a child, which reminds me of an episode of the Huberman Lab where Andrew Huberman speaks about how do you know what career, what passion to pursue in your life. And you think about, and he says that you think about, what did you always do as a kid? And for him, he was always organizing information. And so nowadays he's a professor and he has an amazing podcast where he shares scientific content and he organizes all this information. I believe his example was something with animals. He organized information about animals and then he shared it. That probably needs a fact check, but the core idea remains is that think back to your childhood and I think back to my childhood and what defined me, which is why parents are so formative in those years, because you are like, my parents gave me those identities without my conscious awareness, which is interesting. They gave me the tennis. My mom helped instill the tennis core identity in me, and then later in life I have found other identities for myself. However, I still really fundamentally resonate with that one. So that's interesting, and I feel as though that's a whole rabbit hole I could think about, and how it connects your childhood identities versus now, and all that. Those are the main things. And then, you know, I have this friend that I really want to bring on the pod to talk about identities, because also when you have a life-changing event, I mean, when people have accidents or some kind of medical incident where they can no longer walk, for example, and they identified as an athlete and then suddenly they can't walk. Like there's that fundamental change in identity that's influenced externally, like an external power changes your identity for you and you didn't have a say in it. And then who really are you? I mean, it also goes back to Viktor Frankl in his book Man's Search for Meaning. They, I mean, in the most extreme way, stripped these individuals' identities from themselves, even down to their name. And who were they left with? Like, who were they without their job titles, without their family, without even their name, without their belongings? You know, it's who are we down to the core without all those things? And, you know, on a much less extreme level, I identify heavily with my red nails. So when I don't have my red nails on anymore, I feel this uncomfortable sense of I don't feel like myself, because I have made that so much of my identity. Or when I was in the gym and they told me that I needed to put a full-length shirt on instead of a sports bra. I mean, I felt weird in the gym because that's not how I normally train. And so on a much, much more superficial level than anything like that, it kind of comes back, it goes to materialism and what we surround ourselves with externally. It's like external versus internal definition of identity, and what we allow to give us our identity. Does it come internally or externally? I think I have a mixture of both. Externally being the two I mentioned, and then internally is something more as though, you know, not like knowledge seeking and being a learner and those more things. But I definitely have my external items that give me a sense of identity. But I think it's probably important to not rely so much on those external identities, because I mean, when I go to space, I'm not going to be able to have my nails on, and I still need to be able to feel like myself. Okay, the nails, I know it's superficial. Okay, I know. But like my hair, for example, I identify a lot with having my long brown hair, you know, and it's just interesting, like what we identify ourselves with, you know. And then there's that cliche of when you break up, sometimes people cut all their hair off because they want this change of identity, because it's tied to some period of their life, you know. And it's just interesting to think about identities and what forms those identities, and do we like our identity, and where do we get the validation from that identity? Is it external or internal? Growing up, it was all external. I needed external validation of what I was doing. And as I'm 25, nowadays that I'm 25, I'm like, I feel myself. I have changed from more of like this internal validation of what my identities are, Yeah, I think I just started satisfying myself. And nowadays, and it's kind of funny because nowadays I post online more than ever. I mean, if you're following 50 for Fuel, I am posting so much online. But I'm expecting and needing the least externally I ever have in my life, which I think is really cool. And it's a concrete shift in who I am that I can notice. Whereas before I might have posted things on social media to get, I did post pictures and pictures on social media to get external validation from people. However, now I curate all my Instagrams based on what I like to see. And, it was interesting because I was having dinner with somebody and I had my nails done blue to match my blue outfit for my ultra. And they pointed out, they said, this whole running thing is so down to your identity that it's even down to the color of your nails. And I looked at them and I was thinking, yeah, I mean, you're right. My identities in these distinct fields that I have, these characters that I play, but they're all me, they are a reflection of my internal state of being. So I have the same quotes that I post on my Pursuit the Pod Instagram that I have hanging up in my apartment. Body of a goddess, mind of a universe. I have that hanging up in my apartment and I have that on my Instagram because my Instagrams are just my platform for sharing what is going on inside my brain. It's not the other way around, which I think is really cool because nowadays I post pictures that I like to capture moments of beauty. So my main Instagram is just moments of beauty in my life that I like to capture that I think are pretty or capture a feeling. So I like to post those. I'm not really posting to get people to tell me that I look beautiful or whatever. It's like, I don't, whereas in the past, I of course would have posted something and wanted people to comment on it. Now if people comment on it, it's a bonus. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. But it's just coming from such a different place and it's so fun now because nowadays I just post whatever it's a reflection of my internal state and what I think is beautiful and not trying to get other people to think that it's a certain aesthetic or beautiful. Like I have curated my own aesthetic and what I think looks good. And it's not only what I think looks good, but I enjoy posting, just the whole, I don't know, it's like my whole vibe, okay? Vibe. Like it's my whole aura. It's the studying, it's the fitness, it's the beauty, it's the studying. Did I say that one? It's, it's like a whole, it's transmitting what I feel on the inside. And so, yeah, oh geez, let's try to redo that. That is what has been on my mind this last week. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on identity and what your quests are. What's your main quest? What's the side quest? And how does that influence your identity? And what are your identities that you've kept since you were a child versus the ones you acquired as you got older? And how did you acquire those identities? Yeah, that's what's on my mind. So, well, if you guys made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I know I have a group of my loyal listeners and I appreciate you so much. And that's all I got for now. I will see you on the next one.